Before we start this video, I want to make sure you guys know that we are officially doing our PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X Nintendo Switch giveaway on December 25th, which is Christmas Day. So make sure you show up there and are subscribed before that so you can guarantee that you're entered into the chance to win one of those consoles and more. Alright, here we go. The Last of Us Part 2 basically cleaned house at the Video Game Awards, and as expected, it has become a point of contention amongst those who liked or loved the game versus those who disliked or even hated the game. Now, there's a fan war going on and it's all over the place. Those praising it for winning, congratulations, they're throwing parties and sipping tears, so they say, versus those who dislike the game, who are screaming the show's rigged, they were paid off, this was expected, and this is not their game of the year. So pretty much this video is gonna summarize the feelings of both sides so we can understand how both sides feel about the game, as those who love it often discuss the reasons why they loved it, whereas those who hate it rarely do or rarely give any points or views on why they dislike the game. It's often just a I hated it. And there's credit to both sides on this point. So with that, I'll be starting off with the point of view of those who hate it. Afterwards, I'll discuss the point of view of those who loved it, and then I'll finish up with my point of view of the game as a whole. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into this on the Hate It, Love It, Last of Us Part 2. The main reason why people dislike The Last of Us Part 2 would be because of the expectation they have for the game. Now, one of the things I always try to do is go in with no expectations, but it's kind of hard when you're going with a sequel to a game. So the expectation that people had was that this was going to be the continuation of Joel and Ellie's adventure, and in less than an hour you quickly realize this is not what you're going to be playing at all. This is a complete 180 or 360, however far you want to go, 720 if you want to do two spins. This is just not what people expected to be playing when they put the disc in or when they downloaded the game, and for good reason. To an extent, they are right. Like, people were sold on this game that this was going to be a continuation of Joel and Ellie. There's even promo material where it shows Joel in scenes, yet he's been taken out and replaced with other characters to kind of, I guess, trick you and not let you know what's going on and try to avoid or hide for some of the leaks. But pretty much what we got was not what we expected, which was to be a continuation of the first game. So that is a legitimate reason why people are kind of upset with the game. Like, you got two characters you grew to love, and instantly, like I said, in the first hour, you're realizing this is not what you thought it was going to be or what you signed up for. The second reason why people don't like The Last of Us is because of a huge spoiler. So if you haven't played the game yet, or if you're waiting for a Christmas present, take about 2 to 3 minutes to skip this part so you don't listen to it or hear what's about to happen. Let me give you like 2 seconds. 1, 2. All right, here we go. Is because Joel is brutally murdered at the beginning of the game by basically an NPC at that point. Like, you have a quick moment to play as Abby, so you don't really get to understand what's going on. You kind of know like some shady mess is going on, or you feel like something shady is going on. But yeah, after pretty much helping save Abby, Joel is brutally murdered with a golf club, and it's just not what you want to see for the hero, basically the hero of the last game. Like, we grew to like and enjoy Joel. We got to see him become like a fatherly figure towards Ellie, and you got to see him take care of pretty much the innocence of mankind. Ellie was a child still, even though she grew up in this violent world. She was still a little girl, and you have this grown man who isn't her father, who had lost his daughter years ago in the story, and you get to see them grow and bond, and Joel be able to see Ellie as his daughter, and it just sucks to see him get killed with a golf club in front of his brother, to an extent Tommy, because Tommy was kind of knocked out, so he didn't really get to see it. But to see him get killed in front of Ellie, who is basically his daughter at a time, like, instantly it makes you hate the other characters, and it frustrates you and makes you angry that they decided to do this to this beloved character. Reason number 3 why people hate The Last of Us Part 2. People hate Abby. Plain and simple. Abby killed Joel. Abby kind of kicked Ellie's butt. And pretty much Abby gets kind of her happy ending. She goes through her own journey and her own turmoil, but she kind of gets her happy ending, or so we think. And the people that you play with in the first game that you love, they end up with nothing. So almost up front, Abby is completely despised by some people for what she did to Joel and for not being able to get revenge on Abby. Reason number 4, the story is about revenge, and therefore there's not a lot of character development. So in the first game, you really get to know the characters, Ellie and Joel, and you get to know some of their sidekicks and get to see how Tess and a few of the other people in the games had actual genuine relationships with Joel and Ellie over time. So you get to see that a lot more because it's a story-based game about a journey, where this is about a journey towards revenge. So the characters aren't built up quite as well, so therefore the storytelling overall isn't really what people wanted or expected from part 2 compared to part 1. Now, reason number 5 is something that most people won't be able to verbalize because they aren't creative writers or storytellers. But reason number 5 is the story and writing style of The Last of Us is in a format known as non-linear narrative, which is basically a writing style that jumps from point to point to point and back and jumps around all over the place. And it's used to pretty much build suspense. And I can promise you, gamers who don't like this style, they just don't have a lot of creative writing materials that they read, because it is a common style in things like novels and even sometimes in movies, which I know a lot of people are saying like they want Naughty Dog wants to be a movie company, which to be extent they're making a movie, so half truths I guess. But with non-linear style, it's definitely something that you have to stick with if you want to get this. So using that, it basically forces the player to give up control and be led where the story wants to take you. And you have to have an even greater amount of suspension of disbelief than a person normally would. And the problem is, people who don't have that kind of thought process or who aren't able to give up that control, they're going to immediately not like this. It's going to be awful for them. They are going to have a hard time giving up that suspension of disbelief and being able to follow the story and experience. So when you combine a story that isn't structured in a point A to B or in a 1, 2, 3 ABC style format, you end up with the story not unraveling the way that the mind would naturally expect. And it causes internal frustration for a lot of people because their minds are like, this is how this should go, and this isn't how it's going. So it's like pretty much like people who have a pattern that they do every single day, and then you throw in about 15 different things into their normal schedule or pattern, and they're like, wait a minute, this isn't right. They got to stop and pause because things aren't going the way they're supposed to. And so I would honestly say this is probably one of the biggest reasons why this game has been so controversial story-wise, is because of the way the story unfolds in the non-linear narrative. If that had kind of been changed, I feel like this would have been a little bit more easier to digest, but this is definitely one of the biggest reasons why people don't like this game. And as someone who's a creative writer myself, I kind of understand. I get it. I understand and I get why they don't like it, because it's not for everybody. It definitely isn't. Like, there's even times where I don't like it in certain mediums, and it just is what it is. Like, it's just not the best way to tell a story, especially when you've been conditioned for generations of consoles or decades that a story is straight from point A to point B. And last but not least, the final reason why people don't like The Last of Us Part 2, I kind of said it earlier, but it's basically the way the story ends. So you lose Joel at the very beginning, and so you go through Ellie's journey, you get kind of beat up by Abby, and then you go back out to try to get your last bit of revenge. You know, you give up your family and everything to try to get that last ounce of revenge, and at the very end you still don't get it because you decide revenge is wrong and you want to go back to your normal life. This isn't what you really want, and you want to go back to your normal life. And then not only do you go back to your normal life, you come to find out that your wife, your baby, gone. Like, you're left with nothing. You don't even have your fingers really anymore, so you can't play guitar. The one thing that connected Ellie to Joel, all of it is gone because she just couldn't let go of getting the revenge on Abby that she felt she deserved. Now, Tommy pushes her to go and try to kill Abby, so I felt like that's definitely a little bit more on him as a character. And Ellie, at that time, she was still young, but she was a young adult, and you know, hopefully she had learned from that issue or that mistake, and hopefully she figures out things if there is a part 3. But yeah, just not being able to get the revenge that you spent this entire game trying to get, it's like the final nail in the coffin for most of these people who don't like the game. And I understand why as well too, because well, you know, I even got to that point and I'm like, okay, am I gonna get the kill? And then you don't get the kill, and I'm like, okay, really? So that's pretty much the reason why a lot of people hate The Last of Us. But let's take a moment to think about the reasons why people love the game, because there are a lot of reasons why people love the game. And these reasons are gonna kind of be counteracted to the reasons why I chose the reasons why people don't like the game. So with that, number one, even though we went into this game expecting it to be Joel and Ellie's story, people who saw what happened in the first hour of Joel, once again, spoilers alert, so take about 15-20 seconds starting now to not listen. People saw Joel get killed, they were still able to enjoy the game because they were able to just continue to go on with the story and just see where it goes. So it's kind of an analogy, as in the same reason why people love The Last of Us Part 2, it's the same reason why people love the first one. They want to go on this journey and see what happens and see if this journey is going to pan out for this character. Reason number 2 why people love The Last of Us, they weren't as affected in the long term by, once again, this is a spoiler, so I'm sorry guys if you haven't played this. It is what it is. Take another 2 to 3 minutes not to listen to this part, but and starting now. But the reason why they didn't feel as hurt by it was because they were able to accept that Joel was murdered, and that over time Joel wasn't the hero that we all imagined or envisioned him to be. So Joel had killed plenty of people over his time, even prior to playing the first game. Joel had admitted to killing people. He kind of told Ellie that there's no such thing as an innocent person, alluding to that he's probably killed people that he didn't personally want to kill, but in this name of survival for him and his brother Tommy, he just had to do what he had to do and kill him anyway. Which, do what you had to do isn't really the best term for that, because if people are just trying to survive as well too, and they're not being a threat to you in a sense, killing them just to steal their food or supplies, that's kind of what is implied in that statement. And you have to think about in the first game as well, Tommy didn't have a good relationship with Joel at all. He almost was to the point of disowning Joel because of all the horrible things that Joel had did and helped Tommy do as well too, to help convince Tommy to do. He wanted nothing to do with Joel. So it just goes to show, like, Joel has done a bunch of things and made a bunch of enemies from the even prior to playing the first game. And you see some of the things that he's done in the first game if you beat that one as well too, and you understand, like, Joel isn't a saint at all. And to be completely honest, putting anyone else in that situation, if you're in a world where there's an apocalypse, there's no authority, and you basically almost died there, and you basically are coming to try to get revenge for your parents being killed, chances are you're gonna give yourself the opportunity to do it. So people eventually didn't have as much of an issue with Joel being murdered, and they were able to enjoy the game a bit more because they started to understand, like, Joel was a flawed character. Like, we liked Joel, but he was still flawed. Reason number 3, people simply didn't hate Abby. Now, this is definitely a controversial part as well too, because there are people who don't like Abby still, who love the game, and there's people who feel Abby was justified, who love the game, and it's all in between. So Abby is definitely a controversial character in this, and overall people just didn't hate her. They might not like her, but they didn't hate her. They didn't like kill Abby, hang Abby, like get rid of Abby. Like, you didn't have this huge Abby hate train. And once you progress through her campaign, you get to see some amazing set pieces. She has probably the best set pieces in the entire game and the best fights in the game. So it kind of helps with her whole campaign. It helps you understand her character a little bit more and see her relationships as well, and see that she actually cares. Like, it's unfortunate that these two groups have battled each other out for revenge, back and forth, but if they were able to just talk, they might have been able to fix this whole situation. But Joel cast the first stone, killing Abby's father, and so Abby wanted revenge. And you get to see, just like I said, over her journey, that Abby isn't this horrible person per se, outside of one situation that happens inside the story, in which she should have known, she shouldn't have been digging in that, and whatever his name is, I forgot his name at the time, he should have been messing around with Abby either. But that's neither here nor there. We get to see her take care of Liv and try to help Liv and his sister escape and even stay with Liv the entire time. And you get to see Abby's character growth, and it kind of becomes similar to Joel's character growth in the first game, where he wanted almost nothing to do with Ellie, but end up becoming a father figure to Ellie. And you see where Abby ends up becoming somewhat of a motherly figure to Liv. Reason number 4, they accept the story isn't about relationships, and it's a story about revenge, plain and simple. Naughty Dog told us this, they warned us several times, and even though we still came in with the thought process this is going to be like a continuation of part 1, some people just instantly clicked for them once they saw that first hour and like, okay, this is a story about revenge. They told us this is what it is. And they were able to enjoy it more just because of that. So a lot of people are saying The Last of Us Part 2 story is one of the worst, it's horrible, this, that, and the other. But the reality is, even in comparison to all the other games in the industry, this story is still one of the better stories in games right now, just being completely honest. Even though it's not nowhere near what we expected, and I would say it's not on par with the last game or some of Naughty Dog's other games, which is where the real issue comes into play. Like, we know Naughty Dog for amazing storytelling, amazing acting, amazing graphics, and this, that, and the other. And to see this not be what we thought it was going to be, or live up, in my opinion, and to obviously millions of other people's opinions, to what the first game was, it definitely makes the story look worse than what it is. But it's not a horrible story. It is on par with, if not better than, the vast majority of other game stories out there. Reason number 5, and I think this is one area that both sides can come to a complete agreement on, and that's getting back to the non-linear narrative. Simply put, games are not like movies and not like books, and as a writer you have to be aware of your audience. And even though as a creator we want to create and do our own vision, when you're having a piece of art that you're working on and you're going to be selling, it has to be a blend of not only your vision, but what you feel your audience will be able to digest as well too. So Neil wrote the story as a writer, so those who write themselves or have that mentality or read a bunch of different sources of material that have that kind of style of writing, they were there and got the big aha moment and everything just clicks for them and they can see the game as brilliant. But those who don't have that kind of thought process, this game is a complete mess to them and it doesn't work for them, because their mind is not seeing this narrative as point A to B. Is like, this story is all over the place and therefore it's a horrible story. So I feel like this is one area where if they had simply gone with a linear storytelling of point A to B, then 90% to 99% of the controversy for this game wouldn't be nearly as bad as it was. I felt like they should also have took about 2 hours from Ellie's campaign and 2 hours from Abby's campaign and took all the little parts where you do play as Joel and Ellie together and combine that into one little 4 to 6 hour campaign where it was you playing with Joel at the very beginning of the game, then have the events happen that actually transpire in the game happen after that. So I felt like if we got a 4 to 6 hour campaign of Joel and Ellie in the style that we remember from the first game, then Ellie's story happened, and then Abby's story happened, or somewhere between, or Abby's story happened first and then Ellie's story happened, I feel like people would be able to understand and just get this game significantly more. But that's not what they went with, and what we got was a non-linear narrative, and it's just not the best way to tell a story in a game, especially when your audience has been trained once again for what, 10 plus years on linear storytelling. And the reason and final reason why people love The Last of Us, they probably didn't like the ending for most people, but I think some people who are good at heart, they were able to finally just realize that Ellie just needed to let this go, and to see her finally do it and let it go, even though she lost everything, it was like a sigh of relief of not seeing her go completely into the darkness. Like she was there, she was in there dancing around, touching on the clouds, having a good time in the darkness, but she was able to finally pull herself out of it and hopefully overcome her fear of what she was going through and the struggles that she's been dealing with after seeing what happened at the beginning of the game. I felt like this would have been another change, in my opinion. I felt would have been so much better would have been if they had you play this last part as Tommy instead of Ellie. I know Tommy had his accident, but I felt like that it shouldn't have been enough to keep that from being his part of the story. And if it played out exactly the same as it does when you play with Ellie, I felt like that would have been just a significantly better ending to the game, and people would have appreciated it more. And I felt like you could have kept Ellie in her happy zone because she had already been through enough to get to where she is now. And I felt like this story would have been just significantly better if it went from non-linear narrative to a linear narrative, and changing the ending to, instead of playing as Ellie, you played as Tommy. So I kind of gave my point of view throughout this on what I felt they done well and what I felt they could have did better. But overall, I feel like what was marketed to consumers definitely wasn't 100% what was in the game. They pulled some trickery here and there in the marketing, which I get they tried to do to keep the story from being leaked, or trying to prevent the story from being guessed at what happened and what was going on. But it's something that definitely shouldn't have happened, in my opinion, because all it did was set expectations up to disappoint some people. For the people who are saying the VGAs is rigged and all of this, I mean, the game is won. It's openly expressed that the VGAs are voted on by a panel of journalists who hold, what, I believe 90% of the overall vote. So this is definitely a game that the media obviously loves, and as such, it was going to win regardless. Yes, Ghost won the player's voice, and as much as we love Ghost of Tsushima even here, and as much as people wanted to see it just beat The Last of Us, it's not really a dig because they still cleaned up. And not only did they clean up there, they're going to continue to probably clean up at multiple Game of the Year awards, because lo and behold, even through the issue that some people might have, those are issues that I don't have, because I am a creative writer as well too. So I get their vision. I got what they were trying to do. I don't think they executed on it flawlessly, but one thing you can't take away from this game is it's a technical masterpiece. The graphics of this game for a PlayStation 4 game on base consoles rivals PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X games already. Like, this game looks beautiful. You can't take that away from it. The acting is amazing in it. You can't take that away from it. The technicality is amazing in it. You can't take that away from it. The journey at times is amazing. The set pieces are amazing. The voice acting is amazing. The audio is amazing. regardless of how you feel about the story and how things play out, every other component of The Last of Us Part 2, the gameplay is amazing. Every other component about The Last of Us Part 2 is an absolutely masterclass of game design, and that can't be denied, excuse me. So that is pretty much why The Last of Us Part 2 is also my game of the year, because it has set the tone for what gaming can be, and it's definitely pushing narrative, whether you like the narrative or not. It's definitely pushing it to be more experimental, so people can try to do different things in the game genre outside of A to B linear narrative. And once again, The Last of Us Part 2 is my game of the year as well. I know some of you are probably in the comments going and raging and throwing a fit, and I know some of you are probably like, ooh yes, the whole time, well, at the beginning you were probably like, ooh, it's horrible, it sucks, but now you're like, ooh yes, tears, tears, tears. Let's not do that. Let's just have a good time celebrating gaming in general. The Last of Us Part 2 is an amazing game in my opinion. I would definitely say it's on par with Part 1, maybe not story-wise or journey-wise, but it's definitely there in every other regard, if not, well, actually significantly better in other regards. But I feel like it's a great game, and it is my game of the year, and that's pretty much it. Once again, thank you for watching my videos. Hopefully you subscribe, like, comment, share, be positive in the comment section. This is a channel all about positivity, and we want to make sure we maintain that. So even if you disagree, that's absolutely fine. Post your point of view and what you feel like the game could have did better to make you like it. And if you agree and you love the game, post why you love it as well too. And that's it. Peace.